Hi, everyone. My name is David A. Kelly. I'm the author of the Ballpark Mystery series of books, and I'm really happy to be here at the 2020 Maplewood South Orange Book Festival, even if it's only virtually. And what I wanted to do was read a little bit from my latest Ballpark Mysteries book and tell you a little bit about the research process that I go through when I'm writing the books. So, the Ballpark Mysteries are a series of books that take place in baseball stadiums. They're mysteries that happen in baseball stadiums. And you can see the two main characters here, Kate and Mike. They go to a baseball stadium and they encounter a mystery that they then have to solve. So the first book is called The Fenway Foul Up, and that takes place in Boston at Fenway Park, of course. And the second book, Mike and Kate go down to New York City to Yankee Stadium and the Pinstripe Ghost. And they're going to Yankee Stadium and discover that there is a ghost there, so they have to figure out what's going on. And then in the rest of the series, they go to a variety of baseball stadiums. Again, you can kind of see in the background there is a stack of about 20 ballpark mystery books. They go to about 16 different stadiums. And there are also 4 different super specials, which are longer books that take place at cool places like the Baseball Hall of Fame or the World Series. But what I wanted to do today was to talk about the latest book. It's book number 16. It's called The Colorado Curveball. There you go. And it takes place in Denver, Colorado at the Colorado Rockies Stadium. It's a really fun book. And what I thought I would do is I would start off by telling you a little bit about my research process. Because when I start one of these ballpark mystery books, I actually take a trip to whatever team or stadium or city that I'm writing about, and I spend about 5 days doing research. And I'll take tours of the stadium, just the way you would take a tour of a baseball stadium. I will go to 2 or 3 baseball games. I'll take a lot of notes and a lot of pictures, and usually I'm not sitting down and watching the game. I'm usually circling around the stadium looking for interesting things that might fit into the books. And then, of course, I'll also look around the city or the area in case there's something interesting that I could use as part of the mystery or part of the mystery plot. So let me show you how that went when I went to Colorado, to Denver, Colorado, to research the Colorado Curveball. And let me give you a presentation here, see if it comes up. Here we go. I have to just share my screen, so hang on 1 second. There we go. And there it is. So as I mentioned, this is the series of the ballpark mystery books that I've written. There are 16 ballpark mysteries so far. Those are on the left-hand side. Those are different teams. And there are more books coming out soon. So pay attention for upcoming books. And then over on the right, I have the 4 super specials at the top of the screen. And as I mentioned, those are a little bit longer and they take place in special places. I also have a series of books called the MVP, or Most Valuable Players, and those books are about other sports, a different set of characters playing different sports. And I have a couple of nonfiction books, including one about baseball rubbing mud, which is this really cool mud that gets rubbed on every Major League Baseball before a game. So if you want to learn more about that, pick up my book, Miracle Mud. And I've got a biography of Babe Ruth and some cool things that he did, as well as the Red Sox and how he impacted the Red Sox. But let's take a look at the Colorado Curveball. So you can kind of see on the cover of this book, which is up on the screen, we did a couple of things. So there's some cool use of the color purple, and that's because purple is related to the Colorado Rockies team because it's one of their team colors. And that's actually because of the line Purple Mountain Majesties in the song America the Beautiful, because that refers to the Rocky Mountains. So purple was named as one of the Colorado Rockies team colors. The other thing that's interesting is this is a baseball book, but my 2 main characters, Kate and Mike, are having a snowball baseball game on the cover, which is kind of cool. You see Mike with a bunch of snowballs there. He's pitching to Kate, who's batting. And that's because the stadium is located in the Rocky Mountains. And the Rocky Mountains are kind of high up. So sometimes that means in April, when baseball season starts, it might actually still be snowing. So you should see this picture of opening day from a couple of years ago at the Colorado Rockies Stadium, this is what it looked like. Probably not what you want to wake up to if you're a baseball player hoping to play baseball. Snow flurries and snow on the field. So this is a Colorado Rockies worker cleaning off the field. And we do have a picture of some Colorado Rockies fans waiting for the game to start. I think the one on the right probably doesn't mind the cold weather so much. The game actually did start. They delayed it a couple of hours so they could get the field cleared off. And I actually kind of reference that. You'll see when I read the first chapter to you. I reference that in the first chapter of the Colorado Curveball. Now, most of the games don't involve snow. So the Colorado Rockies Stadium has some other cool features that I discovered when I was doing my research trip. So here's a picture I took of the stadium. And, you know, it's a really nice stadium. It was built relatively recently, about 10 or 15 years ago. And it's got some cool features. You can see along the top there on the right-hand side of the picture, you can see a row of purple seats. So look towards the top, about 4 or 5 rows down from the very top of the stadium, there's a row of purple seats. And I'll give you a close-up of that. There it is. There's the row of purple seats. And it's the only stadium with a row of purple seats, and they're there for a reason. The reason that the stadium has the purple seats is because that shows exactly where 1 mile above sea level is. Since the stadium is in Denver, Colorado, and Denver is up in the mountains kind of, it's a lot higher than any of the other baseball stadiums. In fact, here's a chart that shows you the Colorado Rockies Stadium is over on the right, and this is the elevation in meters. A little bit hard to see on the screen, but you can see visually that the Colorado Rockies Stadium is way higher than the next highest, which is the Arizona Diamondbacks Stadium, followed by the Atlanta Braves and the Kansas City Royals. The teams like the Boston Red Sox and the Mets and the Yankees, they're down near over on the left near the bottom. They're basically almost at 0 feet above sea level. So that actually has an implication that we're going to talk about on the game in Colorado. But I'll do that in a couple minutes. Another feature that I discovered when I was taking my tour of the stadium is their scoreboard. So here's a picture of their scoreboard and a batter in the batter's box. But it's kind of cool because you can see the top of the scoreboard is actually shaped like the Rocky Mountains. So it's kind of cool. It's not a rectangular scoreboard. It's got this special shape. And I referenced that in the story as well. And you can actually also see the Colorado Rocky Mountains in the background. Now, it's a little bit hard to see on this photo, but if you look in the background there, kind of underneath the sunbeams coming down, you can see the mountains in the background, kind of silhouetted there in the cloudy sky. So if you get seats, the right kind of seats, you've got this really nice view of a baseball game as well as the Rocky Mountains in the background. It's a spectacular place to see a baseball game and a really fun stadium. Now, I mentioned that the stadium is 1 mile above sea level. That's where the purple sheets show us where that 1 mile is. And that actually has an implication on how far the baseballs fly when they're hit. So when the stadium opened up, there were a lot of home runs being hit. And here's a chart that shows an analysis of a baseball hit at sea level versus, that's the dotted line, the dashed line, versus a baseball hit at Coors Field, which is the Colorado Rockies field. And you can see that it goes about 12 feet farther. So that actually can have a big impact on the game. And when the stadium originally opened, there were a lot more home runs than at other stadiums. So they figured out that they had to do something, but they really weren't sure what. And they investigated it, and turns out that the baseballs have to be stored in a special room called a humidor. And this is a picture of the humidor. It's in the stadium, underneath the stadium. It's kind of like a special refrigerator, and it keeps the baseballs not at a specific temperature, although it probably does that as well, but at a certain humidity level, because at that height, the height of 1 mile above sea level, things around you get dried out. The air is a little bit drier because you're not down at sea level, and that dries out the baseball. And when the baseball is drier, it actually bounces harder off the baseball bat and gets more energy and actually goes farther. So they found out that they had to basically humidify the baseballs to keep a little bit of moisture in them so they wouldn't fly as far, or more accurately, they'd fly about as far as they do at other stadiums. So the Colorado Rockies actually keep their baseballs in this humidor, and before every game they have to go get them. And again, that was an important part of the baseball stadium, so I made it an important part of my Colorado curveball mystery. And here's a picture of the baseballs stacked up in racks inside the humidor. Now, baseballs aren't the only interesting thing that I found in Colorado. Here's a picture of me with my new dinosaur buddy. So turns out there are a lot of dinosaurs or remains of dinosaurs and dinosaur tracks in the Denver area. So it's kind of a cool place to visit if you love science. If you go just a little bit west of Denver, there's a place where you can see lots and lots of dinosaur fossils and dinosaur tracks, and this is where I met my dinosaur buddy. And so dinosaurs are kind of a big part of the area. And again, I wanted to put that into the mystery, so I found a way to do that. Here's an example of a dinosaur tracks that they've actually cast. They've created these casts from, so you can kind of explore those, which is kind of cool. And I put this dinosaur in the book. So this is actually Dinger, the Colorado Rockies mascot. Really cool mascot, and he's an important part of the book, as you'll see shortly. I also got to take a picture of Dinger with the Colorado Curveball book just to show how much he loves it. So I think at this point what I'm going to do is actually read a little bit from the book, and let me get to the right place here. So I will just do this, and I'm going to read you some from the first chapter of the book. Again, it's called The Colorado Curveball, and the first chapter is called A Surprise on the Elevator. A surprise on the elevator. Kate Hopkins stuck out her tongue. Soft white flakes drifted into her mouth and instantly disappeared. Snow, she asked, on opening day of baseball season? Don't worry, your cousin Mike Walsh replied. Big Bill, the Rockies pitcher, can definitely bring the heat. He'll need a flamethrower for this field, Kate said. We can't even see the grass or the baselines. And there's a picture of Mike and Kate catching snow in their tongue. Kate was right. The Colorado Rockies field was white with snow. It looked like the middle of winter, but it was early April. Mike and Kate were in Denver with Kate's father for the opening day game against the Los Angeles Dodgers. Maybe we can solve the mystery of the missing field, Mike said. Kate shook her head. We're pretty good detectives, she said, but I don't think the Rockies need us to find the field. All they need to do is turn on the heater. Mike glanced at the thousands of empty snow-covered seats. He looked past the mountain-shaped scoreboard to the Rocky Mountains off in the distance. This place is huge, he said. There's no way they can heat it up fast enough. Kate smiled. I'm not talking about the heaters for the stadium, she said. I'm talking about the heaters under the field. The Rockies installed over 45 miles of heating wires to keep the grass warm enough to grow, since it gets so cold up here in the mountains. Fans wearing winter coats and hats had started to file into the stadium for the game. Down in the field, the grounds crew ran out to the infield with shovels. They started pushing piles of snow to the sides. Underneath, a big tarp covered the infield grass. Kate's dad, Mr. Hopkins, laughed quietly. Well, I guess I've seen it all now, he said. Mr. Hopkins was a scout for the Los Angeles Dodgers. Moments later, the sun peeked through the clouds. It lit up the snow and instantly made things feel warmer. The fluffy flakes at their feet started to melt. Mike used his sneaker to push some snow into a small pile. Why does it have to melt? He asked. If we could just have a little bit more, we could have gone snowboarding and skiing right here. He jumped into his snowboard stance and held his arms out like he was cruising down a mountain. He bent back and forth as he pretended to carve through the snow. That would have been a real double play, baseball and snowboarding. And there's a picture of Mike snowboarding. Didn't you get enough snowboarding yesterday? Kate asked. The three of them had spent the day skiing and snowboarding west of Denver. You're the one who wanted to stop early in the afternoon. I didn't want to stop, Mike said. I just wanted to get some hot chocolate and rest. Mr. Hopkins nodded. The altitude around here does tire you out more quickly unless you're used to it, he said. That reminds me. Look at that. He pointed to the row of purple seats that went all around the stadium up near the top. The purple seats, Kate said. That row is exactly 1 mile above sea level. Mike stood up from his snowboard crouch. I can't wait to try sitting there, he said. From 1 mile up, I should be able to see everything in the world. Mr. Hopkins laughed. It's 1 mile above sea level, Mike, he said, not 1 mile above everything else. A buzz came from Mr. Hopkins' pocket. He reached in and pulled out his phone. It's a message from the Rockies, he said. The game's been delayed by 1 hour because of the snow. I guess we should look around for some hot chocolate while we wait. They ran up the stairs to the main walkway and headed for the nearest food stand. Mr. Hopkins followed. Mike and Kate ordered hot chocolate while Mr. Hopkins bought a coffee. To keep warm, they walked around the stadium with their drinks. Mike slurped up all his marshmallows first while Kate stirred hers into the cocoa. I knew we should ask for extra marshmallows, Mike said. Kate laughed. Extra should be your middle name, she said, or maybe more. Mike scowled. Or maybe super nice, he said. Mr. Hopkins' phone rang. Excuse me, it's George, he said. George was Mr. Hopkins' friend and the engineering manager for the Rockies. He had agreed to meet Mike and Kate before the game. Mr. Hopkins walked closer to the field and answered the phone. Mike and Kate continued sipping their drinks. This is good, Kate said. She tilted the cup and finished her hot chocolate. Mike slurped up the last of his. He dropped the empty cup in a trash can and wiped the chocolate from the corner of his mouth. Now what? He asked. Kate's dad was still on the phone. How about a quick race now that we're fueled up? Kate asked. She pointed to the elevator at the far side of the entrance hallway. First one to push the button wins. Okay, go, Mike said. He took off running. Kate dashed after Mike and soon passed him. They ran neck and neck until they were just a few steps away from the elevator. Then Mike leapt forward and pushed the button. It lit up. I won, he panted. Kate stopped and nodded. Yep, she said softly. They were just about to turn back when the button flicked off. Ding! The elevator doors whooshed open. Mike and Kate stepped back. Roar! A deafening growl filled the area. Before Mike and Kate could move, a giant dinosaur came out of the elevator and headed straight for them. And that's the end of chapter 1. I'm going to read a little bit of chapter 2 to you. Mike and Kate jumped back. The dinosaur charged forward. Roar! Kate grabbed Mike's arm. Hang on, she said. That's not a real dinosaur. That's Dinger. Dinger, the dinosaur, stopped in his tracks. His head swiveled from Mike to Kate. Roar! He let out another loud bellow, but Kate stepped in front of him. Roar yourself, she said. We're not afraid. You went extinct over 65 million years ago. You're just the mascot for the Rockies. Dinger stopped charging at Mike and Kate. His head dropped. He leaned back and held out his hands. His arms were short, and he had one small horn on his nose and 2 horns poking out from the top of his head. He was purple from head to toe. Look at that, Mike said. A purple triceratops. He nudged Kate. I think he wants to be friends. Dinger nodded. He reached out and shook hands with Mike and Kate. There are tons of dinosaur bones and fossils in Colorado, and some are worth a lot of money, like millions of dollars, Kate said to Mike. I read about them on the plane ride here. That's one of the reasons they made Dinger the dinosaur their team mascot. But you know the other reason that they did that? Mike glanced at Dinger. The dinosaur held up his small hands and shrugged. No, Mike said. Because they found a triceratops bone when they built the ballpark, Kate said, right under the Rockies dugout. Dinger raised a hand to his mouth as if he was shocked. Mike smiled and reached out to Dinger for a high five. I'd say that's pretty cool, he said. Sounds like good luck to me. Dinger nodded happily. He gave Mike a high five and danced around a little bit, swinging his tail out behind him and waving his short arms in the air. A woman next to Dinger motioned to her watch. Dinger bowed to Mike and Kate and waved goodbye as he followed the assistant off down the hall. We have to go too, Kate said. We're supposed to be meeting George. And that's the end of our reading for chapter 2. So again, that was the Colorado Curveball, and kind of a quick example of the types of research that I do when I'm writing the ballpark mystery books, and how I try to incorporate that research the interesting things that I find into the first chapter or two and into the rest of the book. So if you enjoyed that, pick up the book or pick up one of the other ballpark mysteries. And again, there's going to be more books coming out. And hopefully we'll see you in person at next year's Maplewood South Orange Book Festival. Until then, keep reading, and thanks for watching. Thanks. Bye-bye.